And today we have Mr. Ron Harvey, the president and COO of Dominion Financial Management. And Ron, in the last segment, we were talking about protecting your home. So what does one do if they happen to get laid off or they miss a payment?
Well, surprisingly, Daryl, there are a number of people who really ignore those signs and think, for example, that they're going to get that job within the next 30 days or maybe next 60 days. So the first thing you actually should do is call your lender and let them know what's going on, because they are recording everything. They have it on their computer and they're taking notes. So they'll follow your progress on what is going on as far as your events are concerned. So one of the things you need to do is call your servicer or your lender to let them know what's going on, because in this day and time, as we know, we talked about the Great Recession, we're not sure now when anybody's going to get a job. It could take 90 days, 120 days. So the lender has some programs that are available that could impact you. So you need to let them know as soon as possible.
Okay. I know you talk about some of those programs. I know one of the programs is Making Home Affordable. And of course, they have several options. They have the HARP, they have the HAMP, they have the HAMP 2P, which is you have two loans. And then, of course, they have the principal reduction alternative. And then they have the foreclosure alternative. Out of those, which ones happen to be the most popular?
The HAMP right now, and for the past probably it was 6 years, you know, President Obama and the administration saw a need to help people who are falling behind their own loans. So they came out, and I think it was February, either 2008 or 2009, with this program, the Home Affordable Modification Program. Okay. And so that program is for people, now it is for people, in fact, that who have some type of income coming in, but just can't afford their mortgage payment, has fallen behind. So it helps you get back on track, and it helps your lender make sure that they don't foreclose on you. So that's very important.
And most of the lenders are participating in this program, or is it just a select few?
No, most of the lenders are on board. You've got to call your particular lender to find out, of course, because there are some, for example, that may be some credit unions that may be not on board, and some smaller community banks that may not be on board. So you need to call your lender and see if that's available for you.
Okay. And I understand there's no real income limit on the HAMP, but there are the unpaid principal balances that they have for the houses. So how does that help one if I have a little bit of income coming in? What will they do to my house note? Is it a don't worry about the house note, or am I lowering my house note, or how does the program work?
It's not one of those where you're going to say, let's eliminate your house note, let's not make the house payment for X amount of time. So what they're going to do is look at that income and take what your income is now and try to lower it by 30%, 31%. And so making sure that the income that you have is affordable at that 31% basis. Because of course, when you purchase your house, you were affording it at $50,000 or maybe $75,000, for example. But now you're cut down considerably, so you cannot afford that original house payment. So that's what they're going to do. They're going to also make sure that they try to lower that interest rate for some time. It could be 3 to 5 years, for example, to make sure that, again, it is affordable. Because unlike some people, there's some cynics out there that believe that the lenders really want your home. And in fact, that's not what they're in the business for. As being a former banker, they want to make loans. That's what they want to do. That's where they're going to make the money. They don't make the money by taking the house back. So what they want to do is try to make sure that they preserve the house and keeping you in that house.
And I heard you talked about 31% again. So that is a pretty good figure for someone, always trying to be 31% of your gross monthly income.
Correct. That is correct.
And I know before we talked about gross, and that is before the tax.
Right. Correct.
Now, I know the state of Tennessee, Tennessee Housing Development Agency, they also have a program. Can you talk a little bit about that program?
Yes, the Hardest Hit Funds Program, or some people would call it Keep My Tennessee Home, started out in 2011 of January. 2011 of January. And what they did is they looked at all the counties who were underemployed or unemployed. And so they have money available for those particular things when the program first started out. Then later on, a year or so later, they started adding in people who are on long-term disability, divorce, or death. So you have those particular hardships. If you have those particular hardships in a particular time, you may be eligible to get a loan. I want to tell people that also, because we have some people who think that this is a grant and that you're going to get this money and it's going to be, free for them. It's not a free situation. It's a loan up to $40,000. And if they're eligible, they will make the payments for you as far as that loan is concerned up to 3 years. Now, the biggest thing that I like about the program is there's a provision in there that says if you stay in your house 5 years, the loan is forgivable.
Okay.
So that's a fantastic thing as compared to any other program that's out there.
Now, when I'm going to get this program, I just need to say, hey, I need help, and then you guys give me the program?
I wish it was as easy as that. No, what you need to do is, one of the things that you need to do is contact THDA, thda.org, or 615-815-2200.
Okay.
Contact them and let them know that you're interested in the program. They will send you to what they call a portal, the Keep My Tennessee Home website, and they'll be asked a few questions on your eligibility. Once that happens, then they will direct you to one of the, I believe, 16 area agencies around Middle Tennessee and across the state of Tennessee that you may go to those particular agencies to start implementation of your paperwork. Because you have to get your paperwork processed by one of these processing agencies. You can't do it by yourself. That's another thing that a lot of people thought that they can do, is they get on the website and they can just do it by themselves. That's just one component of the components that are part of this program.
Okay. And does Dominion do the Keep My Tennessee Home?
Yes, Dominion does the Keep My Tennessee Home. Again, we're one of 16 that are in the particular Middle Tennessee area and across the state that does this program. So if you want to call 615-220-5858 to find out about it, we certainly can, and we will field your calls.
Okay. So I have to go to one of these agencies. And what documentation, if any, do I need to bring?
Well, there's a host of documentation because as we've talked about sometimes before, people think that because they're eligible for these particular programs, that they can just walk right in. But just like you buying your home, for example, you had to come up with some documentation. You had to come up with pay stubs. You have to come up with income tax returns, bank statements, those particular things that are going to be needed. That's why you also need to call some of these agencies like Dominion Financial Management to find out what you need so that can be relayed to you so you can go ahead and get that information up front. Because the faster we can get that paperwork, the faster we can get you processed and hopefully get you approved.
Okay. And you talked about processing and paperwork. In general, if you can, is there it takes 5 days once I turn in the documents, then I'll have my loan? Or
right. And it all depends. It all depends. The state can run, because we don't control the time frame, so to speak, because everything is sent electronically. It's not by paper. We're gathering the paper, we scan the paper in, and we send it electronically. And so depending on when the actual documentation comes in, that's why I said I kind of preface that it's very important for the customer or the borrower to have all this paperwork in as quickly as possible to give it to that counselor so they can assess the situation and go ahead and send it to THDA. Then they have a processor and or a underwriter underwriting this particular loan, because it is a loan. They're trying to determine your eligibility and see if they can go ahead and get you approved. So sometimes it takes as much as 30 or 60 days depending on.
Okay. And you talked about the loan. Now, is the loan for what? Is it I have to be behind, or is it making my house payment? How exactly does that?
Well, you don't have to be behind. You could be current, but you see, for example, you working for a factory and they just told you that you're going to be laid off. So in the month of May, for example, you're not going to be able to make those mortgage payments. So you come in, fill out the proper paperwork, we get it through, and there's a possibility that they can make ongoing payments for you for up to 3 years. But if you're behind, of course, they will catch you up. They will reinstate that loan, get you caught up, and then make monthly payments on top of that.
Okay, so that they'll catch me up because usually my payment is going to be my principal, my interest. I got tax. I have insurance.
Correct.
So they'll catch all of those up.
They'll catch not only that up, but if you're in a homeowners association, they'll catch that up if you're behind on that. So also if you have a second mortgage. So if you have a second lien against your house, they will go into what they call third position, and they will catch you up on that as well.
Okay. So not only if I'm behind, but they will also go ahead and pay my house payment?
That's correct.
Now, on the other program, you talked about reducing your interest rate and perhaps extending your term. Does this program do anything like that?
No, this program does not extend your term. This again, if you look at the components of this program for the hardest hit, we're talking about unemployment or underemployment. So unemployment, you have to make sure that you have received unemployment benefits. So,
Okay.
For example, if you had a situation with your employer that did not work out well and they fired you, you may not be eligible for this program. But if you have received unemployment benefits, you may be eligible for the program. Also, let's say, for example, we have a person who was self-employed, especially during the days of housing, where somebody could have been a contractor and they were doing very well. But because of the contracting work they don't have anymore, they had their income cut by 30%. They may be eligible for hardest hit. If we can show that proof that they cut over a certain time frame, 30%, they may be eligible for this program. But they will not touch anything as far as your principal or anything. Matter of fact, the great thing about the program, because they're making payments for you, they're continuing to pay your principal. They're continuing to make your insurance payments for you, your home insurance payments for you, and your taxes as well.
Okay. And you mentioned 30%. So my wage has to be reduced by 30%.
Yes,
Is it just
over a given time period? So if it could go from year to year. So the cutoff period is January 1st, 2008. So anything from that time afterwards. So let's say you were working in construction in 2010, and the construction agency that you were working for, you were self-employed, and they said, listen, we don't have any more work for you, or we have a little bit of work. You were making 60, now you're down to 30 or 20,000. If we can show that, especially on your tax returns, that you've got that 30% loss of income, then you may be eligible for the program.
okay? Now, what if I got married in that time? Are they're looking at my spouse's income as well, or is it just my income?
We're looking for the person that originally signed on the financial instrument, which is called the note. So if you bought the house before you were married, and you signed on that note saying to the lender that you're going to make these payments back, then you're going to be responsible. So if your wife came through after you purchased the home, and let's say she got laid off, if she is not on the note, then she's not going to be considered, because it's only the person who is on the note. So that's very important to realize that as well.
Well, what if I have a rental property or two? Would this program help on that? I'm okay on my primary, but my rental property, I'm having a little trouble.
Your rental property, as far as I'm concerned, or as far as the program is concerned, is not going to be considered. I understand that it's only your primary property. Now, here's the great thing about it, though. You can fall behind on your primary property and have a secondary property and still be eligible for the program. At one point in time, the program did not consider a secondary property. They do now. So if you fall behind on your first and you do have a secondary property, they will consider that.
Well, it sounds like the program is growing, taking in the data and finding out what the people need for Tennessee. Can you tell me a typical home buyer who has gotten into some trouble? What should be their first step? Is it to call the lender? Is it not to call the lender? Is it called THDA? Is it called Dominion? So what should be their first step if they feel that they're in trouble? Either, the boss has said, hey, in 2 months, we're laying people off, like you said, as far as construction.
Right.
Or they're just behind.
The first step, again, is to call your lender. They're the one that you have a legal and financial obligation to. So you need to call the lender, let them know what your story is. Hopefully the lender will then maybe give you a number or two or a few numbers to call some of the HUD-approved counseling agencies in your area. Then from there, you make a connection with those agencies. We're one of those agencies as well. And then we will give you the steps to take to help you with the paperwork to find out if you're eligible for any of these programs. Also, on top of that, we would probably give you some information about THDA. You could call THDA on your own, but again, the first step is definitely calling that lender, because they want to know. They're going to be calling you. If you're current and then all of a sudden you drop off the radar and start falling behind, they're going to call you. If you fall behind now, they're going to call you. So you're going to expect calls, you're going to expect letters from them. So you need to keep them in the loop. Even if you're keeping them in the loop and you're still getting letters, you still need to keep them in touch with you. Keep that communication line open.
Now, there was a point in time where they said that in order for your lender to help you, you needed to be behind. Is that still true?
Well, no, not necessarily. If you have a loan that you are current and you've been current for the last 12 months, but for example, you've been in that particular area that your property value is less than your mortgage balance, you may want to do a refinance. There's a refinance that's available for you. But again, you have to check with that lender to see if they have tied into that program to see if that's available for you. So that's one of the examples that you can use of one of the programs that's available for you.
Okay. And now I know Making Home Affordable, they've gone through several extensions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's all the way out to December 31st, 2015
That's
for the
correct.
Making Home Affordable.
Mm-hmm.
What about the Keep My Tennessee Home? How are they coming? Has there been an extension there, or when is the funding? How long will that last, I should say?
Well, that's a good question, because it started again. The pilot started in January 2011, and then it was stretched out to the rest of the state of Tennessee. They started out with the counties that were most bogged down with unemployment, high unemployment. Then they went to the entire state. They were allocated close to $180 million. I don't know the exact figure, but after time, that money has been pruned down, and so there's not a lot of money available. However, you still can qualify for these things. I can't tell you the exact amount, but there's still money available. So I would encourage anybody who is in that situation where they've fallen behind or even current and don't think that they're going to be able to make payments in the next few months, or even next month, for example, to call THDA and find out some information about that.
Okay. So the program is still a viable program, and like you said, it probably takes or could take 30 to 60 days for the person to be approved.
Correct.
So it is something that the people need to come in. If they have questions or anything like that, they need to get started right away.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. And I know one thing you mentioned, you talked about the unemployment as far as the documents. Are there any other documents that you've seen that have caused a little bit of an issue for your homeowners who've come to you?
For example, if you're in an active bankruptcy, that's one of the things I can think about, that if you're in an active bankruptcy now, you're not going to be eligible for the program. You have to be dismissed or discharged from that particular bankruptcy. So it's very important that you also supply us with the documentation, because if we don't have the documentation and we go through with this and somebody on the tail end finds out that you are in an active bankruptcy, you're going to be ineligible. The other thing also, Daryl, that I want to point out is we're talking about federal programs when we're talking about the HAMP and we're talking about the hardest hit, because even though the state housing agency administers it, this money has come from the U.S. Treasury. So you cannot apply for two federal programs at one time. And I've had the situation where I've had somebody who's done that, and they've been heartbroken because the lender has come back and reported the situation, and they were ineligible not only for one but for two programs. So you have to be very careful about that.
Okay. And speaking, since you said it is a federal program, now does it matter what race that I happen to be? Is that how you get into the program?
Has no consideration of race, age, income, no consideration whatsoever. It's the hardship that counts.
Okay. So I can have just any hardship, or what type of hardship that do I need to have to be in the program?
Well, we're looking at unemployment, underemployment. We're looking for medical, like I told you, either sometimes short or long-term disability, especially this is for the hardest hit. And also we're looking at divorce and death of a spouse. So if your spouse has been with you for a certain amount of time, you've owned this home with him or her, and they passed away, that is also an inclusion part of that program.
And I would assume if it was death, I would need a death certificate to
Absolutely,
confirm.
absolutely, yes. That would be very important. Just like the divorce, the same way you're going to need that divorce decree, because it's very interesting that we have a number of people who say that they are divorced, but they're really not divorced. And so it has to be a public record, and it has to be notarized, and so that information has to come back to us, absolutely.
So I couldn't be, me and my wife are separated. That doesn't.
That will not. That will preclude you from. You can apply, but you probably will not be approved for the hardest hit.
Okay. Now I know some of the documents, and you can tell me if I need some others. Mm-hmm. You need your pay stub. Mm-hmm. You will need your bank statement.
Correct.
And I assume you're going to need your income tax.
That's correct. Yes. And depending on when your hardship is. So, for example, if you have your hardship in 2009, you can almost insist on us asking for that 2009 all the way through. So that's going to be very important as well. And I want to say also, Daryl, this is going to be for both programs as well. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of people say, well, you're asking for so much paperwork. Well, these are federal programs, number one. And if anybody knows about the federal government, they want X amount of paperwork. If you do income tax, you know how much paperwork is involved. So those are the things that's going to be involved. Some of those documents will overlap, and that's okay. That's fine. That's not a problem. We'd rather have more documentation than less. One of the things that you're also going to need is your original mortgage note, or if you refinance the home, that particular mortgage note. That's going to be important. Social Security card, a photo ID, those mm-hmm. particular things are going to be important. Also, for the hardest hit, you're going to need your home insurance, your declaration page. That's going to be important. The other thing you're going to need is any information from your homeowners association, whether okay. you've behind or current on that, plus the fact that, let's say, for example, you're dealing with an attorney. We're going to need that bill from that attorney to see what's going on as well.
Okay. Now that is a lot of documents.
Yes.
Now, so should I just provide you the front page of the document?
You need to provide every single page of that document. So, for example, and we tell people this at Dominion, because what we do is ask them to come to an orientation to mm-hmm. learn about the products. We don't tell anybody what products you need to go into. Mm-hmm. We give you the information, so it's up for you to decide. So you need to know up front what's going on. But all the documentation is necessary. So, for example, if you're banking with a particular bank, that on page 6 of that 6-page document is blank, we need it. Some people will ask, well, that's silly. Why do you need a blank? This is what is required. So instead of having a argument with me or a situation with me where you don't agree, we won't be able to process that particular paperwork until you get us all the paperwork.
And that seems like the good suggestion. You need all the paperwork.
Correct.
Before you can process a file.
Absolutely.
Because I guess it'll cause confusion, or will the file be denied if it's not complete?
The file may be denied. Matter of fact, we on our end, especially for the hardest hit funds program, we're not allowed to send anything until we have a full disclosure, so full documentation. On the HAMP program, they need all the documents. So even if you are at home, have already applied for a HAMP, sometimes the lender, we've had this situation that's been going on for the past few years, that lenders have not been getting all the information. That's why it's good to go to one of these agencies where we can fax that. We will have documentation showing that we faxed this information. And so if the lender comes back and says, listen, we didn't receive it, we have the fax transmittal to say, listen, we have that. So it's very important that they give us all the information, because the lender's going to ask for it on any program. It's very important.
Okay. Well, our time is winding down, so I would like for you to give our audience a couple of things to make sure that they clearly understand the prevention programs and what to bring.
Okay, so for the home affordable modification program, all the documentation is very important. You need to bring the documentation in to the housing counseling agency, but first you need to go ahead and call your lender to find out if they're participating. And the same thing for the hardest hit funds program as well. Call THDA 615-815-2200 to get that started, and they will go ahead and let you you'll get that information that you'll need, and then they will supply us with the information. So that's very important. But bring all your documentation. I don't care if it's in a box, I don't care where it is. Gather all that information as soon as possible, because some people have closed 5, 6, 10 years ago, may not have that information. We may have to call your lender to get particular information. So it's very important to have all that information up front so you can get the assistance that you need.
Okay. Well, Ron, it was a pleasure of having you here, and I just wanted to know if you could give us the numbers again. I know there was THDA, and then also give us your number and contact information.
Absolutely. That's the Tennessee Housing Development Agency. Their number is 615-815-2200. And Dominion Financial Management. Even though we are located in Rutherford County, we serve the 10 counties in Middle Tennessee. Our number is 615-220-5858.
Well, thanks a lot, Mr. Harvey, for coming in and talking to us not only about purchasing a home, but also about foreclosure prevention. So once again, if you do have a situation where you do need to protect your investment, and part of that is some of the foreclosure options, please give Mr. Harvey a call over at Dominion Financial Management, or you can call the state agency THDA at 615-815-2200. And as Mr. Harvey said, THDA will give you a HUD agency that is close by you. There's roughly about 16, I believe, HUD agencies that will do the foreclosure prevention, that deal, and that THDA has those numbers, because they're basically looking out for the consumer. So thank you very much for tuning in to the Moderator, and good evening.